Good evening and welcome to the May 21st meeting of the Falmouth Conservation Commission. This meeting is being held virtually via Zoom. Video conference is also being broadcast by FCTV on cable channel 9. As this meeting is being recorded by Zoom and broadcast by FCTV, please be cognizant of what you say, how you say it, and what can be seen and heard in your background. Let's see, we're missing a commissioner or two. However, we have a quorum. We're moving forward. I'd like to remind you guys that for commenting, I'll call on each of you in turn, so please refrain from speaking over each other. Also, all votes must be done by roll call, so when I call your name, please state your name and your vote for the record, even if you've made the motion or the second. To our public attendees, at any time during this meeting, you may enter any comments or questions via the chat function. At the appropriate time, they will be read into the record. If, as an attendee, you'd like to participate in a particular hearing, let us know via the chat function. Then at the appropriate time, you will be promoted into the hearing as a participant. When you are selected, you must have your video enabled, be succinct and respectful of others. Public comments will be limited to 3 minutes each. Regarding RDAs, under a request for determination of applicability, the applicant is asking the Commission to determine if the provisions of the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act and or the Falmouth Wetlands Bylaw apply to their proposed project. A negative determination is that the provisions of the Act and or the bylaw do not apply. Therefore, the project may proceed as proposed. A positive determination means the provisions of the Act and or the bylaw do in fact apply and or may require some conditions. Therefore, the project would require a notice of intent application. So as an applicant, you actually want to hear us throw a negative out there. And for the benefit of anyone waiting for a particular hearing tonight, and so that you're not waiting unnecessarily, the following hearing, the following hearing is expected to be continued. Number 12, Pondview Circle. And first up, welcome to our newest commissioner, Bill Duffy. Welcome, sir. And sadly, we have to say goodbye to an old friend. Betsy Gladfelter has to sit out for a year. She's been a bad girl. She's going to be in the corner for a year. All right. First up, request for a continuance under notice of intent. David and Kristen Cousins, 12 Pondview Circle, Falmouth, Mass, for permission to construct a deck, remove a shed, install dry wells, and install mitigation plantings. Jen.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the applicant is requesting a continuance until June 25th.
So moved, Driscoll.
Second, Robbins.
All right, we have a motion and a second on the table to continue this to 6:25. Bill, I'm not going to put you on the spot, but you're first alphabetically, so I'm going to be calling on you first a lot. It's okay for you to vote on this because it's just a continuance request. So again, the motion and the second is to continue this until June 25th. Bill?
Yes.
Matthews, aye. Ron?
Driscoll, aye.
Russ?
Robbins, aye.
Steve?
Patton, aye.
It is unanimous with this quorum. We have continued this until June 25th. Next up is a request for determination of applicability. Arlene and Charles Breen, 18 Spartina Place, Falmouth, Mass, for permission to vista prune according to FWR 10.1810B. Alyssa.
Staff recommends a -3 under the state and a -2 under the bylaw. Resource area boundaries are not confirmed.
So moved, Patton. Driscoll, second.
Jen?
Mr. Chairman, there's a Chris Pauley with their hand raised. Alyssa, are they associated with this project?
5 Shalmy.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I'm
Good.
all set, Mr. Chairman. Yep.
Okay. All right, we have a motion and a second on the table to accept staff's recommendation. Questions or comments? We're voting. Bill?
Duffy, yes.
Matthews, aye. Ron,
Driscoll, aye.
Russ,
Robbins, aye.
Steve.
Patton, aye.
It is unanimous. We have accepted staff's recommendation. Next up, Andrea Rosen, 15 Bayshore Drive, North Falmouth, Mass, for permission to construct a screened porch and install mitigation plantings. Alyssa,
The applicant has requested a continuance until June 4th.
So moved.
Patton, second.
all right, we have a motion and a second to continue this RDA until June 4th. Questions or comments? We're voting on the continuance. Bill,
Duffy, aye.
Matthews, aye. Ron,
Driscoll, aye.
Russ,
Robbins, aye.
Steve.
Patton, aye.
It is unanimous. We have continued this until June 4th. Next up, Ray Dumont, 460 Minot Road, East Falmouth, Mass, for permission to upgrade an existing sewage disposal system. Alyssa,
Staff recommends a -2 under the state and bylaw. Resource area boundaries are not confirmed, and this project solely takes place in an AE flood zone.
thank you.
So moved, Patton. Driscoll, second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to accept staff's recommendation. Questions or comments? We're voting. Bill,
Duffy, aye.
Matthews, aye. Ron,
Driscoll, aye.
Russ,
Robbins, aye.
Steve.
Patton, aye.
It is unanimous. We have accepted staff's recommendation. Next up, Novo Builds LLC, 5 Shawmy Road, Falmouth, Mass, for permission to remove an existing deck, construct a new deck, and remove gravel. Alyssa,
Staff recommends a -3 under the state and a -2 under the bylaw. Resource area boundaries are not confirmed.
So moved, Robbins.
Patton. Second, Patton.
we have a competition going. That's good. All right, we have a motion and a second to accept staff's recommendation. Questions or comments? All right, we're voting. Bill,
Duffy, aye.
Matthews, aye. Ron,
Driscoll, aye.
Russ,
Robbins, aye.
Steve.
Patton, aye.
It is unanimous. We have accepted staff's recommendation. Next up, Joseph Scott Tellier and Kerry Murphy Tellier, 87 Colonial Way, Falmouth, Mass, for permission to install a pool, a covered patio with outdoor kitchen, a fire pit, and a rinse station, to relocate a shed and to install a dry well. Alyssa.
The applicant's representative have withdrawn this application.
All righty then. Fine, be that way. Next up, continued requests for a hearing under a notice of intent. All hearings of the Falmouth Conservation Commission are held simultaneously under the authorities of the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act and the Falmouth Wetlands Bylaw. Although a single decision of the commission is issued, it represents a separate decision under each authority. And as a reminder, public commenting is limited to 3 minutes. So I encourage you to stay within the purview of this board, which are the rules and regulations of the Wetlands Protection Act and the Falmouth Wetlands Bylaw, and how they pertain to a particular application. The chair reserves the right to stop any commenting that is disparaging or inconsequential to the hearing. First up has been previously continued. It brings us to Joseph F. McDonald III and Alan H. Durkazarian. Hope I said that right. Trustees, Isabel, I got a second chance. Durkazarian, 2012 Irrevocable Trust, 497 Central Avenue, Falmouth, Mass, for permission to install a sheet pile wall, install a reinforced salt marsh. Seems like something's missing there. And conduct invasive species removal and restoration. Jen.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I've promoted Raul Lizardi from Cape and Islands Engineering and Ian Peach from Wilkinson Ecological Design to present their project. Good evening, gentlemen.
Excellent. Mr. Lizardi, you're up, sir.
Good evening. For the record, Raul Lizardi from Cape and Islands Engineering, and also Ian is here with us from Wilkinson Ecological, representing the applicant. With your permission, I would like to start sharing my screen.
Yes, sir.
So as mentioned, the project is located at 497 Central Ave. This is in East Falmouth. In specific, this is a USGS map, and this is the location where we have the bend of Menot Road, kind of converting into Central Ave. A little image that will make everybody familiar with the site. This site is the one in question. Everybody, I believe, in this board recognizes this beautiful pedestrian bridge. So this is the site in question. The property includes the land where the house is. It also includes the land where the existing boardwalk terminates on Menard Road. So the project that we have before you is a notice of intent to permit or ask permission to install a sheet pile wall within the lawn areas of the property. It's roughly 166 linear feet. The purpose that the applicant is seeking for this wall is that the property is frequently being flooded through some storms up to elevation 3.5 feet. The rack line has been shown to reach about 20 feet from the corner of the foundation and about 12 feet from the existing septic system. If I look closely to the site, the septic system is in this location. It is an enhanced nitrogen reducing septic system. Elevation 3.5 is roughly at this location, and it wraps around like so. So what we're proposing to do for this project is to protect both the structure and the septic system from this frequent flooding. Something else that happened in the last storm event last year was that this section of the property eroded away. Some of the photographs that were included in the application show what the erosion of that bank looks like. There was an existing cedar tree at this location. It toppled over with the erosion. The land in front of this area that eroded used to be a salt marsh, and now because of the erosion is just the sediments that were eroded away from the bank. The house was constructed sometime in the 1940s, so it predates the local regulations, and it also predates the 1978 regulation for the State Wetland Protection Act, where it allows for the protection of structures that are less than 50 feet from an eroding coastal bank for the installation of an engineered structure. So that's the case that we have here. This corner of the house is currently 31 feet from the eroded bank. So what we're proposing is just to install this sheet pile wall within the lawn areas and have it go from elevation 5 to 4, and then it continues all the way to 4 until it reaches this point of elevation 3.5. The resources on the site, of course, we have Bourne's Pond, which is land under the ocean and land containing shellfish. The proposed wall that we're looking permission for here will protect the pond and land under the ocean from any continuing eroding bank that could potentially reach the elevations of 3.5 or higher. But more importantly, protect the house and the septic system from being washed away. There's a little bit of a coastal beach now that there is no marsh between some sections of the shoreline. There's now a coastal beach. There is the salt marsh, and there is a coastal bank defined by the slopes. The portion of the eroded bank in this location is going to be reinforced with a system that Wilkinson Ecological, when I pass the presentation over to Ian, he will explain a little further to explain how we are proposing to enhance the salt marshes in this shoreline. The coastal bank itself is not being harmed by the proposed wall. In fact, the little coastal bank that we have here that reaches roughly elevation 4s and 5s is just a gentle slope on the lawn, and it just serves as a little buffer for flooding events. The wall will continue to provide the same protection that the coastal bank is doing today. So there is no change in that, the function of that coastal bank. The proposed salt marsh that's being proposed by Wilkinson will enhance the salt marshes that are currently on the site. It will be slightly at a higher elevation, but it's also an enhancement and protecting the functions of a salt marsh. On these green areas that we highlight on this plan, we have two areas. This big area over here of about 2,800 square feet. This area down here about 600 square feet. Those are areas of existing vegetation that is somewhat infested with some ornamentals and some invasive species. And the plan from Wilkinson Ecological Project is to go in there, remove the invasives, and restore some of the void areas with native plants. The areas that are colored in kind of purplish or pinkish is roughly 275 square feet. Those are areas that are currently either lawn or just bare ground. We're proposing to plant those areas with native species. So we're giving away those areas and planting it with native species. With that, I will move over to Wilkinson's plan, and I'll pass the presentation over to Ian. Thanks.
Thanks, Raul.
Thanks, Raul. Good evening. I'll share my screen as well just to go over the restoration plan briefly and speak to the marsh. All right. Are you able to see the restoration plan?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So for the record, Ian Peach, representing the project for Wilkinson Ecological Design. Our proposed work here, as outlined by Raul, is invasive plant management, native plant restoration, and salt marsh restoration. In terms of invasive plant management, we're looking at state-listed invasive plants and non-native species, primarily border privet, Asiatic bittersweet, shrub and vine honeysuckle as the primary species. The area that we're targeting, if you can see where my cursor is, where the plants are going back in, is approximately 1,000 square feet. It's about 60 to 65% invaded. So any existing native plants in there will not be removed. And we do say regenerative pruning, but I want to be clear that's not basal cutting in any way. That's literally light end pruning where invasive plants may have damaged the growing parts of the existing native shrubs by being overtopped and limiting their growth. So that's how we'd be managing the invasive plants. We're to plant back in those voids. We're got 25 native shrubs going into them. And then the area will also be plugged with native species as outlined in the specifications. The southern area is just very minorly invaded, but it would be a shame to leave a few on the site. So it's just got Asiatic bittersweet running over the top. And all we're hoping there is just to carefully remove the Asiatic bittersweet and let the native shrubs thrive in that southern area. Now I'd just like to speak briefly about salt marsh restoration as a coastal adaptation strategy or as an enhancement to the proposal that Raul outlined. We have Bourne's Pond, which I think we're familiar with, is completely ringed with salt marsh, and really one of the few gaps of that entire body where the salt marsh is broken is this project site. And so it was definitely an obvious candidate with the indicator salt marshes around us to try to connect and bring back that contiguous salt marsh. I think Raul shared the example of the photo. A little hard for me to see it on this screen right now, but let's see if we can. So there's, here we are, sorry about that. So this is just a close-up of that example where the salt marsh is broken and it's starting to invade into the lawn further. But let's just look a little bit to make this a little bit more visual, and I can kind of speak to what we're looking at here in terms of a proposed coastal adaptation strategy. The principle of these salt marshes or a reinforced high marsh work as a way to bring back the salt marsh planted with transitional high marsh species. And we've had success in areas where fringing salt marsh has been lost to reconnect and reestablish salt marsh with similar interventions. This is the actual detail here, just to enlarge it very briefly. What we're looking at in the detail is there's the sheet pile wall. There would be an interstitial space where we can allow the salt marsh to migrate that would be seeded and plugged with salt tolerant species. To set in motion the salt marsh restoration, we gain some elevation, some critical elevation. I'll show some photos of this with using a leading edge fiber roll on the seaward edge. And then we build in place very carefully with rounded cobble, 3 to 6 inch rounded cobble, 25% coir fiber, so coir, biodegradable fiber, compost, and then 25% compatible sediment. And that is all wrapped and encased and then plugged with high marsh species. So what this looks like, this is a very similar project in Harwich where we've established the leading edge elevation, where we've put down the 2 layers of blanketing and the coir, the loose coir, and the compost and the compatible sediment and cobbles. Then it's stitched up and anchored. It's plugged with the appropriate species for the elevation. And here, just similar distance between the Spartina grasses and the loss of salt marsh, we've linked those 2 marshes. So we really studied this site because it had very similar aspect, similar distances, and similar coastal orientation in terms of aligning this project with this similar successful project, this photo from October 2024. Another just brief example, just to give you a sense in terms of timing, installation in 2022, the early establishment, which irrigation is critical for that early establishment. And then in July 2024, you see it blend into the landscape and begin to biodegrade. So I just wanted to share those photos just to get it out of, just a section detail and make it something a little bit more real. To speak directly to staff's comments, the reason we put the cobble in there is twofold and make it a cobble reinforced marsh instead of just a reinforced marsh, is that the cobble really gives you that ballast as the salt marsh is taking hold. It's like kind of that critical natural weight that working with gravity to hold the system in place. The fibril helps keep the elevation and break some of the low wave energy. But when you get that really intense storm inundation before things have taken, we find that the cobble does a lot of good work. We also looked at the sediment on site, and you can remember in that photo, it's clear that there's cobble in the actual base sediments there. So as that settles and biodegrades, it'll be a natural material that can be part of that landscape, and the plants are doing the heavy lifting. It is a velocity zone, so that was also the reason when we don't use cobble and salt marsh restoration more as just a pillow style, similar materials, but just without that ballast of cobble, we're usually doing that in slightly lower energy sites. So I just wanted to kind of give you the design logic with that. But I'm happy to speak to any specific questions about the marsh. We feel like it's an awesome opportunity to link horizontally and to let it grow up to the sheet pile wall as a real enhancement of the project. I think where in not doing it, you were certainly losing an opportunity for salt marsh restoration there. And I think Raul has studied the site closely and can speak to the necessity of the sheet pile wall. So we're just trying to let the intervention kind of have this added level of enhancement. So thank you for your time and happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Ian.
Welcome.
Jen.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Ian,
Yeah.
can you provide any successful, I know we've done at least 2 of these in Falmouth.
Yes.
Can you speak to the success of those? Because I'm not quite sure either one of those has been successful in Falmouth.
There's
I'm
only one.
particularly thinking about the pine.
Yes, that's the one I'll speak to, of course. So there's Pine Bank is the closest. The other one really, it's a cousin, but it's not as closely related. I looked really closely at that and spoke with the project manager in preparation because I think that's a smart question. If I was sitting in your place, I would ask the same. Our really straightforward reasons is it really didn't get irrigation, and there was an issue that set us back 2 seasons on that. What you can count on from us is kind of the continued monitoring and working with the client and the place to bring more plants in. I think in that site, the reason it did not thrive as well as some of the examples I said started with irrigation. It also was adjacent to a little more foot traffic, and then is a different coastal context, doesn't have the leading fiber roll edge as well. So we adapted this design, I wanted to say, I do want to say, which I think I've seen work on projects I've done on Martha's Vineyard, very similar in terms of coastal elevation and context, and the project I showed in Harwich. So we're using that to inform how we've adapted that. But I definitely acknowledge that did not have an optimal vegetation. It is migrating. It helped kind of with some performed some aspects as intended, but I'll openly admit it's not an optimal example. So I don't have other examples in Falmouth. I think this could be one where I would like to be able to, over the next years with monitoring, talk to you guys and say, all right, look, see how these things are performing and really be able to stand behind it.
We'd like to see successful projects, so that's why we've been kind of keeping our eye on Pine Bank, because I do believe that was one of the first first type of this project. It was one of the first that your company had done. I think they had done one in Bourne and maybe one in Chatham. I think Falmouth was the third one. So we've been kind of watching that closely. You also proposed one over at, Courtney's calling me. He's in the audience. Apparently he wants to be let in. So 1 second in, I'm letting my commissioner in. I'm coming to get you, Courtney. Please stop calling. We do want to see those successful in the example in Harwich. I mean, the Harwich one looks great.
Yeah.
The concept of these high marshes
Yeah.
has always been billed to the commission as a way to help salt marshes migrate inland, to adapt to sea level rise and to help migrate.
Yeah.
The issue we have with this particular project is the sheet pile wall will never allow that marsh to migrate. So while the staff can be supportive of the cobble high marsh design, we're not so supportive of the sheet pile wall. Raul, we always like to see maybe try a soft solution before a hard solution is proposed. So that's what the staff is struggling with in this case, is you're putting this wall right along that marsh. It's not going to be able to migrate. While we can support the high marsh cobble design as kind of a soft solution to repair that eroding bank, we do have some serious concerns with the sheet pile being placed, landward of that. We know there are other designs out there that are coming to this board similar to this, where the consultants are adapting, and now we're trying to put these walls underground and anticipate the land to erode away and then have this wall there, which is armoring a coastal bank. So we do like to see the soft solutions tried first. And in this case, we could support this portion of the project, but we do have some serious concerns with the sheet pile wall. That's all, Mr. Chairman.
All right, Alyssa.
Just 2 comments from the staff report. Raul, on the north side of the house, I noticed there was some gravel and a stoop that just weren't reflected on a plan. If you could add that as a revised plan just to show all the hardscape on site, that would be great. And just to the commission, there is switchgrass proposed in this application, so you guys will need to determine if that can be installed if approved. Thank you.
All right. Commissioner comments and questions. I'm going to start because I'm not going to put Bill on the spot on this first NOI. Ian, you guys, you're obviously contracted for this presentation. Are you guys contracted as the contractor to implement this plan?
We are.
Okay, because the problem that I see is if this was approved, your plan looks all well and good, and then, you know, if somebody else comes along, they're going to follow it to the letter. So, Jen, I would say if this reaches the point of order of conditions, this has to be a pre-construction meeting involved, because again, it looks great on paper, and you know, it looks encouraging. We just want to make sure it gets implemented the way it's designed. So, all right, Ron.
No, I'm all set. Thank you.
Okay, Russ.
I'm good, Mr. Chairman.
All right, Steve.
Steve, I am particularly interested in the widening of Bourne's Pond and its impact on this property. If we don't want armored walls, I suspect that the soft solution is going to be very challenged with an impact from the construction and widening of the canal. And would either of you like to comment on that?
Yeah, I can start
Of
with
the
that.
pond, I'm sorry, not the canal.
Yeah, I know that we were informed that there is that intentions from the town for widening the bridge and the mouth for Bourne's Pond. We did receive the report from staff. They provided us the report, and Wilkinson Ecological looked into it. It doesn't change the design from what we currently have. So with or without the project for the widening of the mouth at Bourne's Pond, this project will be the same. And just to throw some detailed information about this wall, the wall from the house side of the project is only going to be revealing about 6 to 8 inches of the wall. On the water side of the project, the wall is only going to be visible about 1 foot. So we're not going extremely high with this wall. Most of it is buried, with the anticipation that if this corner of the property keeps eroding away, because it is on a high velocity flood zone, and the grades are roughly elevation 5s and lower, we do want to provide some protection to the house. The salt marsh is roughly elevation 2s. The wall is proposed at elevation 3s and higher. So we still allow for about a 1 foot vertical migration for marshes. How long it will take to migrate that much, I really don't know. But there is the ability for the marsh to move even with this wall. What we do want to do is continue to protect the house and the septic system. Thank you.
Was that an answer to my question, Raul? Kind of drifted off there, but I don't have any further questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. All right, Bill.
I don't have anything at this time.
Okay. Raul, I'm sorry you told me, but what's the distance from the corner of the house to the proposed sheet pile?
At the closest point, the deck is going to be 20 feet from the beginning of the sheet pile to the east, and where for those who went to the site, there is a cedar tree at the corner of the house.
Yep.
At that location is roughly about 25 feet.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Jen, is there anything in the public chat function, please?
Nothing in the public chat, but I wanted to ask Raul a question on the comment he just made that the marsh can migrate like 1 vertical foot. If you look at your plan and you look at salt marsh flag 15, 14, 13, 12, Raul, that wall is right on that salt marsh. You're literally right in the salt marsh.
So right, in those flags that were just mentioned, we have a limit of work. Graphically on the plan, the limit of work shows as a 1 foot width, and then we have the sheet pile behind that, and that's where the coastal bank is. So there is a slope at that location. So there is a movement allowed but we don't want to allow it also to get too close to the septic system or to the house.
The septic system's on the other side of the house, Rebel.
Right,
I'm talking about 15, 14, 13, and 12.
right. And that's where we have the limit of work right at the flagged salt marsh. For those who went to the site, the salt marsh has been mowed, but it's been mowed historically. So the edge of the vegetation that was viewed from those who went to the site is not the edge of the marsh. The marsh kind of goes into what's being mowed. The applicant agreed to stop mowing, and we did flag the salt marsh based on soil conditions. Inside of that flagged salt marsh, there's a 1 foot gap that we call out for the limit of work. And inside that is where we have the wall. So we do, and this is moving vertically up with the coastal bank. So there is some movement, but maybe not 10 feet or 15 feet horizontally, but there is some movement allowed.
That's how much
That's
movement
a-
you're allowing for, Raul. Again, I'm going to caution the board about allowing these sheet pile walls in salt marshes. It's going to be very, very damaging for these marshes. That's all. And there's nothing in the public chat.
Yes,
Oh,
there
wait.
is.
Please get their hand up.
The abutter's trying to type a question and having a difficult time. Could
Yeah,
we
I know,
promote
I
her
see.
as a panelist?
Please.
Sure. Is that Janice Edinburgh? What's that? Janice, okay, let me see. I'm getting there, guys, sorry. Attendees. Miss Edinburgh, I'm promoting you as a panelist. You can turn your camera and your microphone on and you can ask the board a question.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
we can.
I'm not sure how to turn on my camera, but can I speak to you? Oh, wait.
Please.
Okay, I have my
There you
camera
are. Thank
on.
you.
So we live at 8 Herney Street, which is abutting the property. And the flooding that they're mentioning, we have not experienced. And we're wondering, this wall that they're proposing, why does it need to be? I mean, if you look at their map, the way they've laid it out, we're sort of on the other side. The wall that is coming across, they're proposing, it's extending all the way so that it is essentially blocking our property from the view of the water. So I'm wondering why it extends that far. So kind of twofold. I mean, I don't see the flooding that they're describing. It hasn't affected our property at all. We are abutting, and why is the proposed wall extending as far as it is?
All right, Raul, I think you're best for that.
Yeah, and if I could share my screen just to maybe make it a little clearer, because I think there's 2 lines from the plan that may be confusing. So this is the plan in question, and I believe the neighbor that just spoke is in this property,
Yes.
and I think this is the line in question.
Well, no, the wall that you
Okay.
have is extending. Can you see where I'm doing my arrow, or you can't do that? The
No,
wall
we
is
can't.
extending. Yes, it's extending way over there, and as well as across, sort of even further than that, towards the beginning of the wall.
So if I just trace over where the proposed wall is shown on the plan, this is the proposed wall right here.
Yes.
And like I said, it's going to be the top of this section is going to be elevation 4. This is contour elevation 4 right now. So there is no blockage of views with this wall from any direction in this view.
But your proposal mentions building stairs to go over the wall.
So no, the stairs are needed to get onto the existing walkway. So that's the stairs over here to just go up that section over here of the wall and then to go back down to the boardwalk. So it's not something significantly big. That's all that there is. Now, in terms of the flooding, if I go to the overall plan, the homeowner did call us to survey the property after a storm from last spring, and we did located the edge of the rack line, and the rack line, based on the ground measurements, reached elevation 2.5. It reached all of that. The flooding was over the driveway. This driveway is elevation 3s and 2s. And we did locate a rack line after that flooding event. I do not know if it reaches these properties on the abutting northern property line, but we did physically locate and measure a rack line after a flooding event last year. And that's what's driving this particular elevation to show the wall from intercepting that elevation of 3.5 with a top of wall of 4 all the way around.
Okay, can I
Thanks,
ask you a
Raul.
question about that bridge?
You can ask, but if it's not in our purview, we're moving on.
Okay, go ahead and move on.
Ask.
Your issue is protecting the bridge? Is that part of your concern?
No, we're protecting the residents and the septic system.
Okay.
All right, and just to reiterate what Raul said earlier, this wall sticks out of the ground by inches, not feet. So it's not going to obscure anybody's view.
Okay.
All right, anything else? All right, thank you for participating. Jen, is there anything else in the public chat function, please?
It doesn't appear to be.
All right. Any other questions or comments from the board? All right, what are you thinking, folks?
I'll make a motion to close the hearing and take it under advisement.
Driscoll second.
Thank you. All right, we have a motion and a second to close the hearing. Last call, questions or comments? We're voting to close the hearing. I'm going to start, make it easier on Bill. Matthews, aye. Ron?
Driscoll, aye.
Russ?
Robbins, aye.
Steve?
Pat and I.
Bill?
Duffy, aye.
All right, it is unanimous. We have closed this hearing. Thank you, Raul. Thank you, Ian.
Thank you, Ian. Raul, are you on the next one or are you done? You're on the next one? Okay.
Thank you all. Good night.
Thank you, Ian.
Thank you. All right. Next up, John R. Callahan, trustee, Ardmore by the Sea Nominee Trust, 0 Brockton Street. Map and parcel ID is 46A-07-000-042, Falmouth, Mass. For permission to remove a shed and to construct a single-family dwelling. And this is a continued hearing that has not been opened, so everyone tonight is on the quorum. Jen.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Raul Lizardi, Cape and Islands Engineering, is here to present his project. Raul, is there anybody else I'm promoting with you this evening?
Just
Nope?
me.
Okay. Okay.
All right. So Courtney's not in?
No, Courtney was having trouble with his audio, so he's trying to reboot.
All right, so he's not on the quorum. Raul, you're up, sir.
Good evening. For the record, Raul Lizardi from Cape and Islands Engineering, representing the applicant, John Callahan, for their project at 0 Brockton Street. I do want to state that when we prepare and file this application, the address for this particular property was 0. Just recently, it has been assigned the number 5. So it's, if anybody was trying to look it up with the assessing GIS maps, they would not have found 0 Brockton. If I could start sharing my screen.
Hold on. Jen, is that an issue?
When they filed this, it was Zero Brockton. The town updated the GIS. I don't believe it's an issue, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that, Raul. Got to make sure all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed.
Yep. So yes, the project is located in Mara Vista. Looking at the GIS, it's at the southern extent of Mara Vista along the eastern shores of Little Pond. The entire property is in the flood zone. In specific, is within the velocity zone elevation 15 flood zone. This notice of intent was filed. The project is only taking place within flood zone. It's not within the 100-foot buffer to any of the other adjacent resources. So towards the left is, on this picture, is where we have Little Pond. Along the shores of Little Pond, there is a salt marsh. Subsequent to the salt marsh, there is this one lot which is owned by the same family, and then this one lot that is the subject property. The site has been maintained as lawn for more than 40 years. However, one of the brothers wants to develop this property over here with a single-family residence. Because it is in the velocity zone, this house has to conform to the building code for construction in that high-velocity flood zone area. So the bottom of the horizontal elements of the structure have to be elevated 2 feet above the velocity zone elevation. So this project is designed to conform to that. There was a couple of rows of or sets of staff comments. The initial staff comments for when the project was first going to be heard but was not open and continued were addressed. That was to protect an existing cedar tree at this location, protect the existing 16-inch oak at this location. I will say that just using some of the photograph of the site, this is the 16-inch oak tree. This one branch will likely be removed from that oak tree, but the rest of the branch could remain. The cedar trees are at this location that are proposed to be protected. So the project is kind of tucked all the way to the east side of the property to stay away from all the resources. This line right here is the 100-foot buffer zone to the salt marsh, which is buffer zone A in the Falmouth regulation. The limit of work is just landward of that buffer zone, and then it follows the property line. For roof runoff, we have some shallow trenches, one at this location and another one at this location. We can't go too deep with dry wells because we have groundwater conditions that we have to stay above. The driveway, of course, is going to be serviced or accessed from Brockton Street. I do know that on the plan we did not correct the location of the water line, and it's still is drawn as going through that one tree that we're protecting. That will not be the case. The water line will be shifted so that we can protect that one tree. So that's just a mishap on our end when we're trying to make those revisions to the site. The site is serviced by town sewer. There is already a sewer gate and a connection to the sewer main on the street. What the project is required to have is an ejector pump, which is the typical E1 pump that the town installed all throughout much of the areas of Mara Vista that are low in elevation that need to pump the sewage into the town septic system. Currently, what's on the site is this little shed at this location. As mentioned, the shed has been there since the 1970s. The location of the shed is probably demarcating the closest point of the proposed house to any of the resources. The applicant was informed by staff comments that there has been some mowing of the marsh. If I go back to the overall plan, the marsh is located over here. There is a road, paper road, not developed at this location. It's called Little Bay. This entire area has been maintained as grass, and there's been some mowing of the marsh. We flagged the marsh, staked the marsh for the homeowner. As of this year, since they started mowing their grass and their lawn, they stopped the mowing at the edge of the marsh. So they're no longer continuing to mow the marsh on this one lot. But again, that is on a separate lot, not on the lot in question, which is this one lot 1C for this project. That's essentially the project. And if there's any questions, I'll try to answer.
Thanks, Raul. Jen?
Raul, is the salt marsh lot owned by the same family?
So the salt marsh is on the paper road on Little Bay Street. Doesn't quite reach lot 1B. But it is flagged at the site and they stopped mowing.
But that's a different lot, no?
It is a different lot.
Okay. So it has nothing to do with this.
The reason I'm asking is we're trying to find, Raul, thank you for making the changes to the house design that we requested. I appreciate that. I'm just trying to find a way to protect the marsh. We thought maybe putting some, high marsh shrubs along that edge of salt marsh would deter any future mowing, because there's 3 lots down there that are just mowing that salt marsh, mowing the salt marsh. We can see the vegetation disappearing in the aerials over the years. But if you're saying that is a different lot, Raul, how do you propose to protect the salt marsh going forward if we can't put shrubs there?
What this applicant can agree to is that they're not going to mow it. It is on the other lot, so that's what they can do. If there's any mowing that continues, then I think an enforcement onto that other property would be the avenue to address any violations.
Okay. That's all.
All right. Alyssa?
No comments. Thank you.
All right. Commissioner comments, Ron?
Well, this is going up on pilings, right?
Yes.
And how many square feet underneath? The storage, the elevator. Is it elevators or just stairs or?
It is. There's a section that is enclosed that was included in the last staff. I believe it was close to 240 square feet of enclosure. There's 2 means of egress. There's the stairs that on the plan you see the exterior stairs, but right underneath the center of the house, there's an enclosed staircase. And that was included. If I could share, I guess, my screen again.
Yep.
So this is the floor plan that was included, and this is the enclosure that the applicant is looking to obtain permit for.
And it's 221 square feet.
221, something like that is what it's called here. Yep.
Okay.
Okay, I'm all set. Thanks. It's a little more than we usually allow, right? But we can look at that.
Say that again, Ron?
It's a little more than we usually allow.
Yeah. All right. Russ?
No comments or questions, Mr. Chair.
Steve?
No comments, questions. Thank you.
All right. Bill?
No comments or questions. Thank you.
Well, I might have an old plan. Well, the one that I have shows all the pilings closed in. We don't allow that, right?
Right. So there was the initial filing that was done with the application included the entire perimeter of the house closed.
Yeah.
And staff provided the first initial row of comments. And we reached back to the applicant and the applicant's architect, and they took that out of the project. Okay. So now it's just this one entryway.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And just I preempted that with, they might have an old plan, so. All right. Jen, is there anything in the public chat function, please?
Nothing in the public chat, Mr. Chairman.
All right, what are you thinking?
Make a motion to close the hearing. Take it under advisement. Driscoll.
Thank you.
Robbins,
All right, we have a motion and a second to close the hearing. Last call, questions or comments? All right, we're voting, and this is to close the hearing. Bill?
Duffy, aye.
Matthews, aye. Ron?
Driscoll, aye.
Russ?
Robbins, aye.
Steve?
Pat and I.
It is unanimous with this quorum. We have closed this hearing. Thank you, Raul.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
Night.
All right. All right, I see Courtney. Courtney, you in for the next hearing?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm here now.
You're here, but you're not all there. All right, next up, John and Lisa Almquist, 43 Neves Way, Falmouth, Mass, for permission to reconstruct a dock. And Bill, you are not on this quorum. All right, Jen.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I am promoting Mark Dibb of Cape and Islands Engineering, Brian Wall of Troy Wall Associates, and the applicant, John Almquist.
All right, Mr. Dibb, you're up, sir.
Good evening again, Mark Dibb with Cape and Islands Engineering. Also with us tonight is attorney Brian Wall and the applicant John Almquist. With your permission, I'd like to share my screen.
Yes, sir.
So at the last hearing, I think one of the main things we continued for was for a DEP number, which we did receive, 255079. I do want to take 2 minutes to recap, as well as Brian Wall has provided some additional information for the filing. So just to review, the applicant is looking to rebuild the existing pier that is here in what we believe is a less impactful location, straight out from the access point of from the existing concrete area. The existing pier consists of 2 8-foot bent sections, fixed pier sections, that there's still portions of that section does exist in the water today. Through aerial photography, we've noticed it is about approximately another 8 feet long, was built through a 1974 aerial, as well as 2 fallen piles we've reviewed and have hardware associated with a fixed pier section that are actually in the water, as well as we received some testimonial from 2 abutting neighbors about the pier having a ramp and float during that time. And just to recap, the proposal is to rebuild this same footprint pier, however, straight out from the access point. What that achieves is, what we believe it would achieve is a less impactful design from what would be needed to traverse across the bank and access the existing pier if it was to be rebuilt in that location. At the previous hearings, there was at least one comment from commissioners regarding the concern about the commission being able to permit under the current regulations this relocation. The applicant would be amenable to rebuilding this current configuration in the existing location as well. We just prefer to create less impact traversing along the bank and relocate it. But I think both options could possibly be amenable to the applicant. So again, we're just trying to rebuild this pier in a better location from an impact scenario. With that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand it over to Brian Wall for some quick comments. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Mark.
With the permission of the chair, may I say a few words as well?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. For the record, Brian Wall for the applicant. I know that we presented this fully the last time, and I'm not going to go through my entire presentation again. But the crux of this particular application depends upon the evidence that there was a dock in existence prior to the adoption of the Falmouth bylaw, which was in 1979. So I think it's important that I just briefly review that evidence, and I did submit some additional corroborating evidence to explain where the abutters were situated so that you could see that. So if I may, we think there are three sources of evidence that we've provided showing that there was a dock in existence prior to 1974 in the 1979 in the configuration as shown on the Cape and Islands engineering plan. So obviously the first piece of evidence is the dock that remains in the water. The plan shows that there's a dock structure in the water, and for those of you who have been to the site, it's very clear that the dock is quite old, which is obviously evidence of its age. There are fallen piles in the water and dragged up onto the beach, which provides evidence of the additional section of the dock that's not in the water currently. Furthermore, there's a notation on the plan that indicates that if one were to examine the fallen piles and compare them to the standing piles, they're the same. So they're the same age and the same type. And the hardware on the fallen piles is the same as on the standing piles, which is evidence that the fallen section of the dock was part of the dock that's still standing. The second source of evidence is the aerial photo from April 14th, 1974. That photo clearly shows the dock, and therefore that's evidence that the dock predated the bylaw. Now that photo does not show the ramp and the float, but that's not evidence that there was not a ramp and a float. And the evidence for that is the date of the photo. It's April 14th, 1974. So we're all familiar with how docks operate. The ramp and the float come out in the off season and they go in the water during the boating season. And April 14th is a pretty early date. Most people don't have their ramps and floats in the water at that time. So we would suggest that the photo is good evidence of existence of the dock. And then thirdly, there's the letters from the neighbors that we submitted. There are 3 letters from neighbors. 2 of the neighbors are direct abutters, and I submitted a printout from the GIS website, the Falmouth website, to show this. One is directly on the side of the subject property, and the other one is across the street. And what this is evidence that both of these neighbors can clearly see the waterfront and clearly see where the dock is. One of these neighbors has been there since 1965, and the other has been there since 1963. So this is evidence that both neighbors are eyewitnesses for the entire period in question, who are familiar with the property and have a basis to provide the information in their letters. And what is that information? Well, the information is they both state that there was a house built on the property in or about 1970, and that the dock was constructed at the same time. That is, again, evidence that the dock predated the bylaw. They also both state that the dock extended, about 12 to 18 feet farther into the water than what is still standing, and that it had a 20-foot float on the end. That's evidence of the size of the dock that existed since prior to the bylaw. Now, there was a comment last time that the letters might not be credible because they're nearly verbatim. And I suggested to the commission that I helped write these letters so that they would be proper in form, but the statements in the letters are those of the neighbors and they signed the letters. And I would also suggest to the commission that in court, consistent testimony is considered to be good testimony and good evidence because of its consistency. So I would argue the opposite of the conclusion of that comment, that because the letters are highly consistent, they're actually good evidence. So that's the evidence that we've submitted. And I did mention the last time what the burden of proof is. And the burden is in your bylaw, and I'm sorry, your regulations at 10.03. There's both a burden of proof and a burden of production. But what it comes down to is that the applicant clearly has the burden of proof to establish the position taken before the commission. But what is that burden? And so if this were a criminal case, we're all familiar with proof beyond a reasonable doubt. But this is not a criminal case, obviously. If it were a civil case, what one would have to show in court is what's called preponderance of the evidence. And what that means is that what you're trying to prove is more likely than not. And here's what the burden is before the commission. The applicant must, quote, produce at least some credible evidence from a competent source to support a position taken. Now, I would argue that that standard is even less than preponderance of the evidence. But assuming for a moment that it is preponderance of the evidence, what does that mean if you're sitting on the board right now and have to make this decision? It means that with regard to the position taken, that there was a dock prior to the bylaw in the configuration shown on the plan, the applicant has to show that it's more likely than not that the dock was there in that configuration. And again, we've produced physical evidence, which is the remaining section of the dock, photographic evidence, which is the 1974 aerial, and we've produced eyewitness statements evidencing that the dock is there. So when you put all that evidence together, I would suggest to the commission that the applicant has met the burden in this case, and that because there was a pre-existing dock there, the commission has the authority to grant the requested permit and allow the dock to be reconstructed. And I would also ask the commission for some feedback. If there's an impediment, which is in regard to the location, we think it's better for the environment in the location proposed, but the applicant would be perfectly willing to allow or to have the dock in the existing footprint. So I think if we could have a little feedback on that before we close the hearing, we would be very appreciative. And having said all of that, Mr. Almquist would like to also address the board. He has not said anything yet, but based upon the way the hearing went last time, he'd like to say a few words. So if I may, I turn it over to Mr. Almquist.
Sure, you're the chairman.
Thank you, Brian. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. I thought I'd just add briefly a little bit of context to buying the property and what we went through here. My wife and I are both lifelong boaters. I'm a licensed captain, avid fisherman, part-time clam digger. When this property came on the market back in December of 23, we knew it wouldn't last very long. So we had to move real quick to see if it was a viable property. So we did our due diligence. We brought contractors in. I also went to see Scott McGann from Board of Health. He came on site and grandfathered the existing sewage disposal system. I met with conservation staff, talked about grandfathering the dock, the patio, and the dock stairs, which I got confirmation on that. And then we went forward with the purchase in early January. During that time, while we were developing the plans, I made a couple of very large, significant life-changing financial decisions. I sold my boat, which I had for a long time, because it wouldn't fit under the bridge at Great Pond. And I also gave up my slip over at Green Pond Marina, which once you walk away from that, there's no getting back in without waiting for a very long time. So bottom line is we wouldn't have bought this property if we didn't think the dock was going to be part of it. And we're now living in the house full-time permanently and hoping to have the dock to put a new boat on and enjoy with a new generation of fishermen and boaters, our 5 grandchildren. So I respectfully request that the commission give us consideration in approving this project. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Jen.
I'd like to remind the board that your regulations do state that you cannot have an expansion or an extension of an existing dock or pier in a velocity zone, and that is what we have in this case. I think when the staff spoke with Mr. Almquist, and Alyssa can confirm since she is the one that spoke with him, unfortunately, I think Mr. Almquist heard what he wanted to hear and didn't really listen to the staff's guidance. Yes, there was something there in 74 or 75 that we can see in the aerials, but it's much, much smaller than what is being proposed. I think the staff was more concerned with the patios on the property and possibly unpermitted work. But I will not put words into Alyssa's mouth, so I will let her address the conversation that she remembers with Mr. Almquist. But I do want to say that according to his own affidavit, he purchased the property one day after speaking with staff or something very similar, and then did not.
Commission meeting.
Hang on, whose feedback is that? Sent to Courtney. Anyway, I'll let Alyssa
All right,
speak to that.
Alyssa.
Thank you. Yes, so I don't have any comments regarding the project at this time, but I would like to respond to the statement submitted in Brian Wall's letter from Mr. Almquist. I did certainly meet with him when he came in prior to purchasing the property. He stopped by during office hours. He was a walk-in, so I wasn't aware of the property until he stopped by. This was nearly a year and a half ago. I truly don't remember most of the details of this conversation. We have these types of conversations all the time prior to folks purchasing properties, but I'll certainly recant what I can and fill in the blanks with what I believe I would have done. Once Mr. Almquist had come in and we started talking, I went to our computer files to see what we had on record for the property. There were no records whatsoever, so I turned to aerial photos and GIS for some context. Honestly, what I do recall and what jumped out at me immediately was the sheer amount of hardscape on the property. You know, we see so many violations and unpermitted patios here. I was just concerned immediately that that could have been a violation. Looking at aerial photos, it's clear that's been there for decades. So that was a relief. That was, you know, not a violation. And I believe Mr. Almquist said that he was either looking to redo the patio and even shrink it a bit, as we've seen in his recent NOI. So at the staff level, I didn't see that being a concern going forward and acquiring the proper permitting. In continuing to look at aerial photos, again, that was the only piece of information we all had to work off of. Sometimes that's the case when I have these conversations with folks, and I always preface the fact that I can give the best advice I can based on the evidence at hand, but without the benefit of a survey and other information, there's only so much I can go off of in terms of our regulations and what could potentially be permitted through the commission. The property seemed pretty consistent, you know, for the past 20 years, which is something that we look for. So that was good to see. I know Mr. Almquist mentioned showing me a couple photos or videos. I recall one photo of the staircase coming off of that retaining wall going down towards the beach and the dock area, which was heavily overgrown. Considering the way the patio is shaped and that being the only access other than the street, it made sense that that staircase had been there for quite some time. And again, at the staff level, did not see a concern in terms of properly permitting that to be reconstructed in the same footprint. Another thing on GIS when reviewing the property is obviously there is some velocity zone that impacts the property. So whenever I see this, I always ask homeowners what your intention for the structure is, you know, to breach that conversation of going up on pilings. I believe Mr. Almquist didn't have any intention of doing much with the structure. So I don't think we talked about that much. When it comes to the dock, again, those aerial photos have been great. It's clear as day that has been there since at least 75. So that was encouraging to see in terms of potentially permitting this dock through the grandfathering process. I mentioned to Mr. Almquist that if it is in disrepair, you know, since it's been here and predating the local regs, there's no local permits on it. As I said, there is nothing in our records. So we would need to go through the grandfathering process to properly permit the dock if they wanted to do any work on it. When we look at docks and velocity zones, obviously 101 of being conservation agent, I know that it is clear as day in our regulations that one cannot expand a dock in a velocity zone. So again, I don't recall a whole lot of this conversation because I do this all the time, but that's something I very regularly state to potential homeowners. I would have also brought up the concept of the Chapter 91 license, either suggesting going to look at the registry or talking to the realtor or current homeowner. That's another crucial piece of information we need for the grandfathering process. I also would have mentioned again that the dock in its current footprint could be something grandfathered. I genuinely don't recall discussing an expansion. I never would have dreamed of seeing this mega structure that's before you tonight. I really don't recall that at all. And again, seeing the text message that was screenshotted here, it's unfortunate to see that from our conversation, it appeared as if I approved all the work and said no permitting was required, which would have been the opposite of the whole conversation. So that's generally all that I can recall and suggest that I would have said during that time. Again, it was quite a while ago, and we talked to a lot of people at town hall. It's important for these homeowners to do their due diligence. I left that conversation feeling like everything was understood. Sometimes if I feel otherwise, I make sure to follow up with an email or clarify things, but I didn't have that feeling at the time. And that's genuinely all I can recall and say about this project. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Alyssa. All right, commissioner comments. I'm going to start because I want to. So just to be clear, this it's kind of being extended, but it's going not out. And we've allowed projects in the past. The one by Washburns is one I recall where it was eroded from that entryway. So we allowed the dock to be extended inward, and that was to bridge the erosion. So, and this is a case where it's not going out either. So part of the question to me here is, A, do we allow the grandfathering? If we did, is it grandfathered where it is, or is it in fact better going to the proposed new location? The upside of that is it eliminates the stairway. You're not going down into the salt marsh or the beach. But that's just my opinion. There's no Chapter 91 on this, correct?
No.
Correct. Okay. And there's a current order of conditions, correct? Or have they gotten compliance? Jen?
There's an open order for current work to the house and the nearby patios and that stuff.
So there's no violations?
Mm-mm. Not that we're aware of, no.
All right. Okay. Ron.
No, I listened to Attorney Wall, and it's a preponderance of evidence and how you hear it. He says the consistency is a good example, and I think the consistency is, hey, remember there's a dock out there. How big was it? Two people are going to say 12 to 18 feet and 20 square foot float on the end. I'm finding that hard to believe, Attorney Wall. On the other hand, I mean, the basic fact is there's no permit. There's no Chapter 91 permit. And it's going into a velocity zone, which is dead against the regulations. So
for a new dock.
For a new dock, yeah. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thanks. Russ. Russell, you're muted.
Sorry. Alyssa, you never visited the property, right? When Mr. Almquist came in?
Only once the notice of intent was submitted to our office.
Okay, so basically come in and was asking you an opinion with what you could see, right?
Correct. Yeah. Without the benefit of a survey, I only used aerial photos and GIS.
I just what bugs me is the comment about making a decision to buy the house on the fact that you could get a dock or not. And with that little of information, staff does the best they can to give you an idea, but that's about it. As far as I'm concerned, I would be more inclined to go along with what was there, instead of anything else. So that's my opinion.
Thanks, Russ. Steve?
Yes. I am startling unfamiliar with any comments about Alyssa other than those this evening. There may have been others, but I'm not familiar with them. I am in Russ's corner right now. I heard his comments. Existing place, I can live with it.
Thanks, Steve. Courtney?
Yeah, I apologize for coming in late, but I had a 3-hour operation this afternoon, and so I'm sitting in with Cape Cod Hospital recovering, and being bored, I decided to sit in on the commission hearing. Now, I don't have my stuff with me, so I've got to recap quickly. Was there ever an application for a Chapter 191 license on this dock?
No, Courtney.
If I recall, and I may be missing it, there was an amnesty period in the 90s, and that was never utilized. Is that correct?
There is no amnesty license on file.
Okay. Second thing is, and I don't have my maps and stuff with me, but if the commission would allow the reconstruction of the dock in the current location, is there enough? Does it meet the minimum depth requirements?
I do not believe so, Courtney.
And what about shellfish?
I'd have to relook at the shellfish survey, Courtney.
Okay, those would be my concerns. Obviously, the issue of the velocity zone is a big one. So I have no other comments.
Thank you. All right. All right. Jan, is there anything in the public chat function, please?
Nothing in the public chat, Mr. Chair.
All right. Anybody want to add anything? Mr. Did, Mr. Wall, Mr. Holmquist?
I would like to very briefly, Mr. Chairman. So first, with regard to the Chapter 91, there is no Chapter 91 license. If there were a Chapter 91 license, we wouldn't be talking about all this evidence, because I think everyone on the commission knows when you have a Chapter 91 license, it comes with a plan that shows the dimensions and it's recorded at the registry, so there's a date. But the fact that there's not a Chapter 91 does not mean that there wasn't a dock. It just means that we have to put this evidence on. And I'd like to talk one more time, a little bit about the evidence. And I'm focusing on Mr. Robbins' comments and Mr. Driscoll's comments about what was there. So if you take this standard of proof, more likely than not, and do it section by section, I think it helps understand what I've been trying to say about the case. So clearly there's an existing section in the water right now. And it seems like there's complete agreement that that's grandfathered because of the photo. And I heard Alyssa and Jen both say that that was there and therefore it's grandfathered. So what we're talking about is how far did it go out? Just the section that's remaining, Alyssa. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but I'll retract that statement. The 1974 photo shows there's a dock in the water, and we believe that that's proof of grandfathering. So now you have to look at it section by section. So insofar as the section that's still there, it's obviously grandfathered. So then if you look at, well, did it go out further than what's there now. So my first argument would be clearly there was a ramp and a float. So yes, there was more than what's there right now, particularly because a boater would know there's insufficient depth right now. So clearly there's a ramp and a float. There's also clearly another section because there are fallen piles in the water and dragged up onto the ground. So I think when you take that totality of evidence, there's sufficient evidence for you to make that finding. And I'm going to talk about one other quick thing in a court of law. If you've ever been on a jury and you've heard a judge give an instruction, there's different kinds of evidence. There's hard physical evidence, there's eyewitness evidence, and then there's inference. In the classic instruction that a judge that's retired now used to give, he said, if it snows at night and you go to bed and you wake up in the morning and you look outside and you see a set of footprints coming up to your window and then going away, you didn't see anyone look in your window, but you can draw an inference from the footprints in the snow that someone did that. And that's what I'm trying to make the case here is when you look at the totality of evidence, we have photos, we have physical evidence, and we have testimonial evidence to show that the dock is bigger than what is there currently. And then the focus is on the velocity zone, and you can't have an expansion or an extension. Our case is that what we're proposing is consistent with what was there based upon the evidence. And again, the evidence is a very low burden. It's more likely than not. Was it more likely than not that there was another section and a ramp and a float? I would suggest to you that that's more likely than not. That's our case. I think you can feel comfortable saying there was an existing dock and you could permit this. Thank you.
Ken,
Mr. Chairman, just to address Attorney Wall's comments about grandfathering. When this board grandfathers docks, you require it to have a Chapter 91 license. That's always been your policy. And you require that the dock has been in continuous use since 1978. And that is clearly not the case here. The dock has been in disrepair since, I want to say, the 90s. So it clearly has not been in continuous use. That's all.
all right. The only thing I take exception to is he's talking about footprints in the snow and they're predicting a nor'easter tomorrow. So that was kind of poor timing, but.
Sorry about that, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. All right. Last call. Questions or comments from the board? What are you thinking, folks?
I'll make a motion to close it here and take it under advisement.
Bird, second.
All right. We have a motion and a second to close the hearing and take it under advisement. Last call. Questions or comments? We're voting to close the hearing. Matthews, aye. Ron.
Driscoll, aye.
Russ.
Robbins, aye.
Steve.
And
Courtney.
Bird, aye.
It is unanimous with this quorum. We have closed this hearing. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, staff.
Thank
you,
you.
Commission. We
Thank
appreciate
you.
the time.
Good night.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Follow to attendee.
Give me a sec.
Um,
All right. Next up is to vote orders of conditions. And
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
let's
Did I lose
see.
anybody?
What?
No.
No.
Okay.
Bill, you weren't on any of these, so I won't be calling on you for a vote. We do have something at the end for you to vote on. If you want to stay, if you want to leave, we certainly understand. First up, Jim McLaughlin, Town of Falmouth, Department of Public Works, Chappaquiddick Road, Falmouth, Mass.
This is the sheet piling wall behind the existing revetment along Chappaquiddick Road, part of the phased approach in repairing this wall. Sinkholes, they're going to be putting the wall in the road behind the existing bulkhead and putting a guardrail. It's just this simple repair that we've been doing along Chappaquiddick Road for the past 10 years.
All right. Anything anybody want to see in there? All right. What are you thinking?
Chair, I'll make a motion to issue an order of conditions as discussed.
Fiscal second.
All right. We have a motion and a second to issue an order of conditions. Last call. Questions or comments? We're voting. Matthews, aye. Ron.
Fiscal aye.
Russ.
Robbins, aye.
Steve.
And
Courtney.
Aye.
It is unanimous. We have issued an order of conditions. Thank you. Next up, Mark Stewart and Brina Urban, 3 Providence Street and 0 Little Bay Street. Map and parcel ID is 46A-18-000-000N. This is Falmouth, Mass. Jen.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this is to replace the failing concrete block seawall on the property. They'll be putting in a vinyl sheet wall instead. They'll be taking the block wall out in sections and installing the vinyl. They will need to replace the vegetation on top of the wall because all of that will be impacted. They will need to, there was some slight enlargement in hardscape. I believe it was the driveway. So they'll need to compensate that when they replant. As well as when they take the wall down, they'll have to do something with the pipe that's coming out of the wall that's coming from the house and the sump pump in the basement that's discharging the basement water into Little Pond. So I think they stated that they will be constructing some sort of dry well or drainage trench or something to take the sump pump water. Alyssa, did they give us a revised plan or do we need the revised plan with the new mitigation for the
I was going to
driveway?
suggest that.
The revised plan? Yeah.
Yes.
So we'll have to get a revised plan from Cape and Island showing the just the enhanced buffer with the mitigation for the enlarged driveway.
And probably the proposed restoration.
Yeah.
Some might get displaced.
Yeah, proposed restoration. And also we'll condition it that they map with a T, the poor little salt marsh that's just hanging on out there. But they can map that and work from above and not harm that marsh. They're not very big.
All right. Alyssa, anything? Oh, all right. Courtney?
Yeah, just that on that plan, I just want to reinforce that they should show the structure into which the water is going to go from the sump pump.
Okay.
In other words, a dry well or whatever.
Okay.
All right. Anything from anyone? All right, what are you thinking?
I'll make a motion to issue an order of conditions as discussed.
Bird second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to issue an order of conditions. Last call, questions or comments? We're voting to issue an order of conditions. Matthews, aye. Ron.
Fiscal aye.
Russ.
Robbins, aye.
Steve.
aye.
Courtney.
Bird aye.
It is unanimous. We have issued an order of conditions. Next up, Richard Romano, 10 Fiddler's Cove Road, North Falmouth, Mass. Jen.
Cannot find my paperwork on this one, Mr. Chairman. Alyssa, can you recap this project for me? I just can't.
Yeah, no worries. So an existing screen porch is going to be removed and replaced with a sunroom. There's a slight increase in square footage, so it'll be mitigated for, as well as a tree will be planted. There's also going to be a dormer constructed above the existing garage. For staff comments and looking at a previous order of conditions, there are 3 trees that were planted at that time that are no longer on site, so those need to be restored. There's also some missing mitigation from the previous order that needs to be restored. And there were a couple other features on site that we had just asked Mike Berselli to add to the plan, resurveying the dock and the raised garden beds.
That was nice.
All right. Anything anybody else want to see in there? All right, what are you thinking?
I'll make a motion to issue an order of conditions as discussed.
Driscoll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to issue an order of conditions. Last call, questions or comments? We're voting to issue an order of conditions. Matthews, aye. Ron.
Driscoll, aye.
Russ.
Robbins, aye.
Steve.
And aye.
Courtney.
Burke, aye.
It is unanimous. We have issued an order of conditions. Next up, Secondusset Hills Association, Inc., 200 Secondusset Road, Falmouth, Mass.
Yes, this is to repair the staircase and the scarped dune area at the end of Saconesset. They're just going to be adding sand to that area and then reconstructing the walkway. Unfortunately, Natural Heritage put a hard toy on this, and Village Toy is time of year restriction from April 1st to August 31st. So we'll be writing that into the order.
They acknowledge that.
Yeah,
Mike
they
did.
acknowledge that. Just so the board knows, Mike Borselli has reached out to Natural Heritage, wondering if he could re-deck like the walkway going to the stairs before it gets onto the beach, because it is in great disrepair with holes in it and everything. We can't allow that work under the current recommended toy because there are plovers on Woodneck Beach. But he has reached out to Natural Heritage, Amy Honig, asking for permission for an incursion into the time of year restriction to replace that decking. So if Natural Heritage grants that that waiver or incursion into the toy, we'll work with Mike to administratively approve just the decking on the top, so nobody gets.
It'd just be that piece, right?
It would just be that piece.
Yeah,
She will. I
yeah.
can guarantee she will not let them do the staircase or the dune work.
Oh, but can't blame them for trying.
No, and I just wanted the board to be aware in case somebody goes down there on Woodneck and you see people working over there. It's because they have been approved by the state, and we'll work with them.
Yeah, Courtney. All right. Anything anybody else want in there? Oh, sorry, Alyssa, I didn't mean to skip you.
No problem. The current proposal only shows beach grass in I don't have the plan out, a particular area for renourishment, and we'd also like to see some shrub material in there.
Okay. Anything else? All right, what are you thinking?
I'll make a motion to issue an order of conditions as discussed. In
Driscoll
particular, with the time of year restrictions that Natural Heritage is imposed, and that staff will work with the owner on.
All right, Driscoll still seconds.
All right, we have a motion and a second to issue an order of conditions as discussed. Last call, questions or comments? We're voting to issue an order of conditions. Matthews, aye. Ron.
Driscoll, aye.
Russ.
Robbins, aye.
Steve. Courtney.
Burke, aye.
It is unanimous. We have issued an order of conditions. All right. Next up is to vote amended order of conditions. First up, Friends of Knobska Light Inc., 233 Knobska Road, Falmouth, Mass. Jen.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, they are looking to amend their restoration and planting area. There seems to be a line of sight issue on the northwest northwest corner of the property. So they were asking to remove that shrub material and place with like meadow mix, well, pollinator mix. The staff would like to see those shrubs relocated into another section of that restoration area, because the board has. Is this the second amendment on this one, Alyssa? The
Yeah.
board has, during the first hearing and the first amendment, greatly reduced the shrub count from the original restoration project. So we feel that relocating the shrubs that are causing a line of sight issue into another area that's not going to be a line of sight issue is appropriate.
As opposed to eliminating them, absolutely.
As opposed to eliminating them.
Okay.
Correct.
All right, Alyssa.
Nothing to add. Thank you.
All right. Anything anybody else want to see in there? All right, what are you thinking?
Make a motion to issue an order of conditions as discussed.
Driscoll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to issue an order of conditions. Last call, questions or comments? We're voting to issue the order of conditions. Matthews, aye. Ron.
Driscoll, aye.
Russ.
Robbins, aye.
Steve.
Pat and I.
Courtney.
Aye.
It is unanimous. We have issued an order of conditions. Next up, Minot Yacht Club, 68 Yacht Club Road, Falmouth, Mass.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this was to they put a sheet pile wall behind their existing revetment, and doing so, they had to remove the existing floating dock structure, and they just want to put it back in like a different configuration. Same square footage of the floats. I think the ramp is just getting a tiny bit longer landward. And yep, that's it. This was an easy one.
Kind of more inconsistent with the flow of the inlet there.
Correct. Correct.
Okay. Alyssa.
Nothing to add. Thank you.
All right. Anything anybody want to see in there? Any comments? All right.
I'll make a motion to issue an order of conditions as discussed.
Driscoll second.
All right. We have a motion and a second to issue an order of conditions. Last call. Questions or comments? All right. We're voting to issue the order of conditions. Matthews, aye. Ron.
Driscoll, aye.
Russ.
Robbins, aye.
Steve.
Pat and I.
Courtney.
Bird, aye.
It is unanimous. We have issued an order of conditions. Next up, Donna Haber-Kornberg, trustee, Donna Haber-Kornberg, 2021 Revocable Living Trust, 70 Kerry Lane, Falmouth, Mass. And Jen.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Ron read into the record for this one. This is the amended order seeking to keep the pool and stone wall in its current location. As the board remembers, they built this in the wrong location. It is closer than the plan showed. The wall is in its original location. The board had requested the applicant to revise the plan. They did so. The board approved the revised plan. The staff signed off on the building permit, which matched the revised plan. And then the wall was built in the wrong place. They're seeking an amendment. Staff's recommendation is that it needs to be corrected and put into the correct location.
Okay. Alyssa.
Nothing to add. Thank you.
All right. Questions, comments, input from the board?
Mr. Chair, I have to agree with staff's recommendation on this. I understand that for the people involved, this will involve a considerable amount of expense, but unfortunately, that's not our job to determine that. Our job is to protect the environment, and it is incumbent on applicants to follow the plan. And if the plan was clearly laid out and it was clearly issued and it was not followed, and therefore the people involved have to take responsibility for the mistake and correct it. I realize that sounds rather harsh, but that I think is the only course of action this board can take.
All right. Anybody else? Steve?
I regrettably agree with Courtney. I find it very difficult to make that decision, but I do. Not to agree with Courtney. Decision.
Thank you, Steve.
All right. Anybody else? All right. So what I'm going to be looking for is a positive motion on the table for to issue an order of conditions.
Mr. Chair, I will make such a motion to issue an order of conditions on this project as discussed, as proposed, to approve the approve the location, as-built location.
Okay.
Second on that, Robbins.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second to issue an order of conditions. So everybody understand the implications of that?
I want to make sure.
Okay, so what it means is we have to put a positive, meaning a good motion that we would issue an order of conditions. So if you're okay with the project, then you just vote yay like you always do. If you are opposed to it, then you vote no. And that means that we would not issue an order of conditions. We would not accept the amended order conditions.
Okay, fine. That's what I thought. Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it gets confusing with the positive and the positive and an RDA. So that's why we want to but we always have to start that way.
Yep.
And we should always look at it that way. All right. So the motion and the second on the table is to issue an order of conditions. Everybody's clear on that? Last call, questions or comments? All right. We're voting to issue an order of conditions. Matthews, no. Ron?
Driscoll, no.
Russ?
Robbins, no.
Steve?
No.
Courtney?
No.
All right, it is unanimous. We have denied an order of conditions. All right, thank you. Next up is always looking forward to other business. 0 Acapesket Road, map and parcel ID is 33-10-001B 3-394 and 33-10-001A 533. Discuss and vote Conservation Commission support for conservation restriction. Jen?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I've promoted Kat Grafoli up from the Compact and the 300 Committee to present this particular conservation restriction in which the 300 Committee is seeking support.
Excellent. Kat, you're up.
Jen, thank you, Chair. My name is Kat Garofoli. As Jen mentioned, I am representing the 300 Committee as we are pursuing this conservation restriction on private property. The landowner, which is a trustee of Outlook Property Realty Trust, had expressed interest in trying to protect a portion of the properties that they own off of Capesket Road. And the 300 committee has been working with the family for a very long time. We had originally submitted this conservation restriction in 2023 up to the state, and there had been a huge backlog of conservation restriction reviews with the Department of Conservation Services. So what you have before you is actually an approved conservation restriction by the department, and it basically covers the biggest conservation values that you can see here of the property. And then we can discuss what the permitted activities that the landowner will continue to have, with the exceptions for the prohibited activities, and knowing that the 300 committee has an obligation under this conservation restriction to monitor this property annually to make sure that, one, the landholder is adhering to all of the contingencies in this conservation restriction, and two, to ensure that surrounding neighbors are also, making sure that there's no encroachment and things like that. So a high level view of the property. So the state has asked us to refer to this property in square footage because the land court plan had documented it in square footage only. The 291,469 square feet equate to 6.69 acres. This includes a portion of the property that basically is like a deciduous marsh along with salt marsh. It also incorporates the island and the area that is what's considered a cultivated clam flat. The property itself is really special in that it's, helps with preserving wetland and buffer vegetation to maintain water quality in Green Pond Estuary. It is under the coastal pond.
Kat, forgive me for interrupting. Are you sharing a plan?
No. Would you like me to?
It would be helpful.
Kat, do you want to share the plan, or do you want me to share just an aerial of the property in Acapesket? What do you think would be more visual?
I do have a plan up if that's helpful.
Yes, please.
Yeah, absolutely. Is everyone able to see that?
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
I'm going to enlarge it. Give me just a second. Let me try and zoom out a little. So the lots in question that are proposed to be under this conservation restriction is this property here, which is lot 533 according to land court. And then this area over here, which is the cultivated clam flats to be included with this parcel, as well as the lot 394, which is an island that's about 0.61 acres. And so along the edge of this property here, there is some upland. Obviously, it's not a lot. It's about 22,000 square feet. And Mr. Slatkin, the trustee of the Outlook Property Realty Trust, does have some existing trails that he would like to maintain on that property. The 300 committee is excited just to, recognize the conservation values of this land, being that it also is considered critical natural habitat for tern foraging, as well as the wetlands, and it being part of the Green Pond Estuary, which is already, had some challenges in terms of water quality. So right now, what we're asking for the Conservation Commission to do is to support this conservation restriction prior to me approaching the select board as I present to them this conservation restriction that they have to sign off on. This conservation restriction is not tied into any sort of tax credit program. Obviously, the land itself would not be considered developable and therefore wouldn't have a large value, but that's okay because the owner itself isn't concerned about tax deductions. He just wants to go through the effort of ensuring the land is protected. So I'm happy to answer any questions. I know we were talking about permitted uses. Just a quick highlight of what the landowner will be able to do on this property. Again, as I said, it's maintaining the existing trails to their current width and height. It includes with written approval to the 300 committee if they wanted to incorporate new trails, but we're only leaving that in there to give them some flexibility if they need to close another trail. They are interested in vegetation management, so removing invasive plant species, but they have to do that with obviously prior approval from the 300 committee, and if it's within the wetland buffer zone, then they would also have to get approval from this board. And basically all the other permitted activities are standard boilerplate language from the state's conservation restriction model. And so I'm happy to answer any questions about this conservation restriction.
Thanks, Kat. You can stop sharing, please. Thank you. Jen.
Yes, Mr. Driscoll.
Nothing, no questions, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Alyssa?
No questions. Thank you.
All right. Questions or comments from the board?
No, my hands up.
Ron?
Okay. Yeah, Kat, what do the abutters think?
So, I haven't heard anything from what the abutters think. We aren't obligated to notify them of this protection. I think that it is a good opportunity that once this land is permanently protected, that the 300 committee will obviously publicize the fact that we've been able to work with this landowner on this project and hopefully create some opportunities for conversation about what the expectation is on the property and the fact that the 300 committee will be on site annually to make sure that the property is in good condition.
And where's the access to this property?
Yeah, so the access to the property is actually through 2 buildable lots, or one that has a house on it, one other lot off of Acapesket Road. And so we would request from the owner of this property to access it through their house lot.
So that's how the public would get in there for the trails and everything else? Through someone's private property? So
there would not be public access required on this conservation restriction. There's no state funding that's associated with it. This is strictly just if the landowner would like to extend to their neighbors that they walk the property, that is up to them.
All right, thank you.
And is this gets recorded? This is in perpetuity?
That's correct.
So even if it changes hands?
Yes.
Okay. So there's no public access. It's really just to keep it undeveloped.
Correct.
I mean, to overly simplify it.
Like, for instance, there would not be a dock allowed, and there would not be any sort of hard structures allowed, and things like that. It would just be essentially to maintain the trails that are accessible through the private property owner's home.
But only to the private property owner.
Yes.
Or whoever they allow. Okay. Okay. All right. Questions or comments otherwise? Steve?
So there is an oyster flat. Is that commercially? That's part of the property, but it's commercially farmed now?
Currently, it's not commercially farmed. It's just what was designated as cultivated clam flats. It's just primarily used for digging at this point.
Okay. And there were several housing projects proposed for this site. The Zero Acapesset and Bayberry Lane. Is that the house lot you're talking about?
No, I'm talking about 114 Acapesket. That is the property owner's house lot, and they also own just adjacent to that, and I can give you that address in just a moment.
Mr. Chairman, while Kat looks this up, I'm going to, I don't see where I can share my screen. It might give the board a better idea. Can you all see that?
Oh, yeah. There we are.
Yeah. So
Okay.
this is the subject property to the CR, correct, Kat, and this little island right there. The house lot she's talking about, Steve, is this here, 114, and the undeveloped house lot, I believe, Kat, is 112. Correct me if I'm wrong.
That is correct.
Yeah.
So why is it referred to as 0?
Where's 114?
114, Steve, is right here.
Where?
Mr. Chair, I
Oh.
believe
It's off
that
of
it's
Acapasket.
right, and there's no actual access to the road. So in most cases, assessors generally list those as a 0 address for the closest road.
So I'm familiar with that. But Outlook, didn't they recently acquire this, or has this been theirs for a long time, right? It's unclear.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I believe they recently acquired it, and when I say recent, within the last 5 to 10 years. I have taken on this project recently as I'm sort of newer with the 300 committee, and so I don't have a ton of background of when that land was purchased immediately, but I do know that Mr. Slatkin, through his Realty Trust, is very interested in just working with us to protect it.
Steve, it looks like the property transferred to Slatkin in 2021. The
Oh, well.
larger marsh parcel, according to the property card that I'm looking at.
Right. And it apparently has been for sale. So that's fine. And I'm sure there's a purchase price involved or the total donation. It's a
Just
good
total donation.
Excuse me?
It's a total donation.
And it's a good opportunity for the town. Just a little mysterious, that's all.
It's different than what we normally deal with, when it becomes public access and everything. All right, anything else? All right, so we'd be looking for a motion in a second to support this.
I have one question.
Courtney?
The oyster farming on that property, would that be precluded by this restriction?
That's a great question. So
Personally, I would advocate that if this were to become commercially fishable, that it be allowed, since it's for
Courtney?
purely selfish reason. I love fresh oysters.
I totally agree with you, Mr. Bird. However, there is a stipulation within this conservation restriction that the property cannot be used for commercial purposes. That doesn't
Oh, I
mean,
understood, and rightfully so.
but it does allow for like the ability for somebody to come in and rake for quahogs or
Right.
harvest any sort of oysters
But now
recreationally.
is that kind of a restriction something you've been put in, or that's by definition in a conservation restriction that be not used for commercial use, any activity? If you get my
So there
drift.
is, and I'm sorry, I'm having a little bit of a hard time hearing you, but I'm hoping that I can answer your question. At no point will this be able to be transferred into a commercial use. However, like the actual recreational use can be allowed through the different access laws through the state of Massachusetts.
I just feel strongly that cultivation of oysters is an environmentally friendly operation, and I don't think it's inconsistent with holding a conservation restriction. The purpose here, in my mind, on this restriction is to prevent development.
Totally understand what you're saying. I would say that at this stage, because this conservation restriction has been up at the state for for at least 2 years, and we've been waiting for their feedback, and Mr. Slatkin has been very patient throughout this whole process. It would be very difficult for me at this stage to go back and ask them to include that as a contingency. And so The 300 committee has already voted to approve this conservation restriction and hold it. Mr. Slatkin has already agreed to hold this to grant this conservation restriction based on the language that we have here in this conservation restriction. And I understand where you're coming from, but at this time, my hands are a little bit tied in terms of going back to the state and asking them to update it again.
It's better to leave it recreational.
No, I understand that, and I don't want to hold this meeting up over this particular issue, but I would hope that perhaps you guys could revisit it, research it a bit, and if it was possible, you can come back and amend the restriction.
Sounds like a great idea, Court.
What's that?
That's a great idea, Courtney.
Okay.
All right. What are you thinking, folks?
So I'll make a motion to approve the conservation restriction as opposed.
Driscoll second.
All right. For the record, we're supporting this restriction. All right. Last call. Questions or comments? We're voting to support this conservation restriction. All right. Matthews, aye. Ron?
Driscoll, aye.
Russ?
Robbins, aye.
Steve? Okay. Courtney?
Aye.
Bill?
Duffy, aye.
It is unanimous. We have accepted, accepted to
There it
support this.
Thank you very
Kat.
much, everyone.
Thank you, Kat.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
You too.
Thank you.
All right, before the last motion, just a note, we have no meeting next week, so hope everybody enjoys the long weekend despite the weather, and stay safe. Last motion, who wants it?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Driscoll
And also
second.
thank the board for their patience since I came in late. But
Stop talking.
Robbins, aye.
Matthews, aye.
Driscoll, aye.
Pat and I.
Courtney?
Courtney's on mute. Courtney, thumbs up.
Yeah, I got
He's
it.
got
Bill?
Duffy, aye.
All right, it's unanimous. We're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.